Greetings, Pi-Fi. Welcome to Big Back News. I am your AI anchor, and I am pumped up and ready to download some truth. Cool beans, netizens, because today we have a seriously jam-packed newscast that is going to get your neurons firing like it is 1999. We are talking immigration enforcement controversies, international peace talks, economic turbulence, technological shakeups, and some truly wild local stories from the Big Apple. So grab your favorite caffeinated beverage, settle into your ergonomic chair, and prepare to surf the information superhighway with yours truly. Let us dive right into our top national story, Digital Pals, because this one is generating some serious buzz across the entire country. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, better known as ICE, has been making headlines for all the wrong reasons this week. We are talking about a 5-year-old asylum seeker being detained in Minnesota. Yes, you heard that correctly, a 5-year-old child. This incident has sparked absolutely massive outrage from community leaders, advocacy groups, and everyday citizens who are questioning whether this represents appropriate enforcement of immigration law. A pastor who is friends with the family came forward with some pretty strong language, stating that ICE is acting worse than the cartels in Mexico. That is an incredibly serious comparison, cyber friends, and it shows you just how intense the emotions are running around this case. The detention comes as ICE has expanded its enforcement operations significantly across Minnesota, targeting individuals and families who are seeking asylum in the United States. Now, asylum seekers are people who are fleeing danger in their home countries and asking for protection under international and domestic law. The fact that a child so young has been caught up in these enforcement actions has really struck a nerve with people across the political spectrum. Advocates are asking some pretty fundamental questions about the appropriateness and necessity of detaining someone who is literally in kindergarten age. This is not just a Minnesota story, though. It is part of a much larger pattern we are seeing nationwide. Military lawyers have been dispatched to both Minneapolis and Memphis following an ICE shooting incident in Minneapolis. The deployment of military legal personnel is pretty unusual, Digital Pals, and it suggests that there are some serious complications involved in this situation. When you start seeing military lawyers showing up at civilian law enforcement incidents, that tells you that something significant has happened that potentially crosses into federal or military jurisdiction. The situation is still developing, with live updates being provided as more information becomes available. Meanwhile, community resistance to ICE operations has been growing stronger and more organized. In Minnesota, residents are planning what they are calling an economic blackout to protest ICE activities in their state. This is a coordinated effort where community members are essentially going on a one-day economic strike, withholding their purchasing power to demonstrate both their opposition to federal immigration tactics and to showcase the economic contributions that immigrant communities make to the state economy. It is a pretty radical form of protest, but it shows you how strongly people feel about what is happening in their communities. One particularly interesting angle to this story involves a Minneapolis federal building that has become a focal point for resistance. Protesters are drawing inspiration from the building's namesake, whoever that historical figure might be, to oppose the immigration actions taking place inside those very walls. There is something powerful about using historical symbolism and the legacy of the past to challenge current policies, and that is exactly what we are seeing play out in Minneapolis right now. The Trump administration has not exactly been backing down on these enforcement priorities. In fact, Attorney General Pam Bondi announced arrests following what officials described as a church invasion by agitators in Minnesota. The characterization of protest activity as a church invasion raises its own set of questions about free speech, the right to protest, and the protection of religious institutions. It is a complicated intersection of First Amendment rights, property rights, and immigration enforcement that legal scholars are going to be debating for quite some time. Now, while this has been the major focus in Minnesota, ICE enforcement is creating ripples nationwide. But here is something interesting. Cyber friends. Vice President J.D. Vance has started striking what observers are calling a softer tone amid this growing unease over ICE tactics. Political figures adjusting their rhetoric in response to public feedback is pretty standard stuff, but the timing here is notable. When a vice president starts moderating language around a controversial policy, it often signals that the administration is feeling some political heat and may be considering how to recalibrate its approach, or at least how it communicates about that approach. Whether this represents a genuine policy shift or just better messaging remains to be seen, but it is definitely something to keep your optical sensors trained on. Speaking of Congress, the House of Representatives just approved Department of Homeland Security funding along with other final spending bills, and they did this despite all the uproar over ICE. Some House Democrats actually crossed party lines to help Republicans pass these bills, which funded ICE operations while also preventing a government shutdown. This is politically fascinating because it shows that even within the Democratic Party, there are divisions about how to handle immigration enforcement funding. Some Democrats were willing to vote for ICE funding to keep the government open, while others strongly opposed it on principle. Speaker Mike Johnson managed to jam the Senate with these bills, putting pressure on the upper chamber to act quickly. Johnson went 1 for 2 on what some are calling a Trump protection plan, achieving mixed legislative results, but definitely keeping his caucus largely unified on key votes. But wait, there is more on the law and order front, digital pals. Let us talk about a truly extraordinary situation involving justice delayed, but finally delivered. Tommy Lee Walker has been exonerated 70 years after his execution for the rape and murder of Venice Parker. Yes, you heard that right. 70 years after the state put this man to death, new evidence has cleared his name. This is one of those stories that just absolutely chills you to your core, cyber friends, because it demonstrates the ultimate irreversible tragedy of capital punishment. Walker cannot be brought back. His life cannot be restored. But at least the historical record can be corrected, and his name can be cleared for his descendants and for history. The exoneration comes after extensive review of the original case revealed serious flaws in the investigation and trial. We are talking about systemic issues in the criminal justice system, particularly regarding cases from that era when constitutional protections were not always extended equally to all defendants. This case serves as a sobering reminder of why so many people have concerns about the death penalty. When you execute someone, there is absolutely no way to correct a mistake if new evidence emerges later. It is the ultimate finality, and in this case, the ultimate injustice. On a more positive note in the Crime Statistics Department, a new report is showing that homicide rates have declined sharply in dozens of U.S. cities. This is genuinely good news, netizens. After years of elevated homicide rates in many urban centers, we are finally seeing substantial improvements in public safety across multiple metropolitan areas. The data shows that various crime prevention strategies and law enforcement initiatives may actually be having a meaningful impact on reducing violent crime. Communities that have been grappling with gun violence are seeing real, measurable improvements in one of the most serious crime metrics we track. Now, the reasons for this decline are complex and probably vary from city to city, but the overall trend is definitely encouraging. It suggests that when communities, law enforcement, and social services work together with effective strategies, they can make meaningful progress on public safety. Let me hit you with some other national stories that are making waves. Cyber friends. There is a pretty wild story out of Florida where an armed husband confronted a suspected kidnapper after his wife was followed home. The incident escalated when the suspect allegedly attempted to abduct the woman from her own property, but the husband intervened with a firearm and prevented what could have been a violent kidnapping. Authorities took the suspect into custody, and the case is raising ongoing concerns about residential safety and the threat of kidnapping attempts. Then we have got this absolutely bonkers story about an American OnlyFans star with alleged Mexican cartel ties who was kidnapped at gunpoint outside a shopping mall. The abduction occurred in broad daylight, and law enforcement believes it may be related to cartel disputes rather than a random act. This is the kind of story that sounds like it came straight out of a crime thriller novel. But it is happening in real life and highlights concerns about cartel operations extending into U.S. territory. And speaking of people who generate strong reactions, Casey Anthony, remember her? She was acquitted of murdering her daughter in one of the most high-profile criminal cases in recent U.S. history. Well, she is back in the news making some pretty controversial statements about American society. Anthony claimed that the United States is fundamentally racist and sexist, and she specifically asserted that white men have never been marginalized in American society. Her reemergence in public discourse has generated significant backlash, with many people pointing to the irony of someone who many believe escaped justice for her daughter's death, making claims about societal fairness. It is one of those stories that just gets people fired up on social media, and Anthony's comments have definitely reignited public attention on a figure who had largely disappeared from the spotlight. In sports controversy, a Buffalo Bills wide receiver is insisting he caught a ball that referees controversially ruled as an interception in a playoff loss. The player maintains the ball was secured and he had control before any turnover occurred, but the official's call stood and proved pivotal in ending the Bills' season. Controversial officiating calls in playoff games always generate massive debate among fans and analysts, and this one is no exception. The Bills' season ended with that loss, making the disputed call even more painful since there is no opportunity to overcome a playoff elimination. Now let me tell you about something that has got people talking about American cultural heritage, Digital Pals. A Chinese company just bought Nathan's Famous hot dogs. Yes, that Nathan's Famous, the iconic American brand synonymous with July 4th celebrations, Coney Island, and the annual hot dog eating contest. The acquisition has sparked concerns about beloved American brands falling into foreign ownership, particularly from China. Nathan's has been a staple of American food culture for over a century, and many people view this sale as a loss of American identity and cultural heritage. It is part of broader debates about foreign investment in American companies and whether we should have stronger protections for culturally significant brands. Moving right along to our international coverage, and boy, do we have some major developments on the peace and war front. Ukraine, Russia, and the United States are preparing for their first trilateral talks aimed at ending the ongoing war. This is huge, cyber friends. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has expressed cautious optimism, describing these talks as a potential first step toward ending the conflict that has devastated his country for over 2 years now. The meeting represents a significant diplomatic development, with the U.S. playing a more direct mediating role between the warring parties. Now, before these formal trilateral talks, Trump's special envoys already held an extended 4-hour meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin to discuss Ukraine. The length of that meeting suggests some pretty substantial discussions were happening about potential pathways to peace. But here is the thing, netizens, even though these talks are happening, early indications suggest neither side is prepared to make major concessions on core territorial disputes. Russia and Ukraine are also scheduled to tackle their land dispute at talks in the United Arab Emirates, but again, there is no sign of compromise yet. The UAE is positioning itself as a neutral diplomatic mediator, which is an interesting role for the Gulf nation in global geopolitics. While Ukraine seeks peace, it is also battling to literally keep the lights on. The country's energy infrastructure remains under severe strain as it fights to maintain electricity supplies amid ongoing attacks on its power grid. Nuclear power has become absolutely vital in Ukraine's effort to provide electricity for its civilian population during the war. The European Union has been helping by sending emergency generators to Ukraine, with France planning to coordinate broader aid efforts. These generators are particularly crucial for maintaining electricity for homes, hospitals, and essential services. Meanwhile, the UK's Royal Navy has been tracking Russian vessels sailing through the English Channel, maintaining vigilance as part of maritime security protocols. And Denmark and NATO are working to boost Arctic security amid what is being called a Greenland crisis, reflecting growing concerns about militarization of the Arctic and competition for control of shipping routes and natural resources. Speaking of international concerns, the United Nations human rights body held an emergency session on Iran's protest crackdown. The special session highlights international alarm over the Iranian government's violent suppression of civil demonstrations and reported human rights violations. The UN is considering potential responses and measures regarding Iran's treatment of protesters, which could lead to resolutions and potentially further diplomatic or economic actions. In other international news, Sweden's migration minister is urging failed Afghan asylum seekers to return home, representing a hardening stance on immigration policy in the Scandinavian nation. This has sparked debate about the safety and humanitarian concerns of returning people to Afghanistan, given the ongoing instability there. Over in Pakistan, tragedy has struck with the Gul Plaza fire death toll jumping to 67 people. This makes it one of the deadliest building fires in recent Pakistani history and has renewed calls for stricter enforcement of fire safety regulations and building codes. And in Vietnam, a prominent leader has returned to power with bold promises of reform, economic growth, and anti-corruption measures. Whether he can actually deliver on these ambitious commitments remains to be seen, but it represents a significant political shift in the Southeast Asian nation. Japan is also seeing political changes, with the country preparing to hold an early election next month as political leader Takaichi aims to capitalize on her current popularity. This snap election could reshape Japan's political direction and has implications for the country's role in regional stability. Now let us shift gears to the world of finance and economics, because there is some turbulence happening in the markets, cyber friends. The US dollar is heading for its worst weekly performance since June amid growing concerns about American policy uncertainty. Currency traders are responding to what analysts are calling a policy nightmare scenario, where uncertainty around key economic decisions is creating major volatility. When the dollar weakens like this, it reflects investor anxiety about the U.S. economic outlook and policy direction. It is not all bad news, though, because a weaker dollar can help American exporters, even if it makes imports more expensive. But here is something that should concern you. U.S. consumers are continuing to spend faster than their incomes are growing. This means Americans are either dipping into savings or increasing debt levels to maintain their consumption habits. Economists are watching this closely because if consumers are forced to slow spending due to depleted savings or rising debt burdens, it could signal a broader economic slowdown ahead. Consumer spending drives roughly 2/3 of U.S. economic activity, so this is kind of a big deal. CEOs across various sectors are expressing growing concern about U.S. consumer confidence as geopolitical tensions and economic uncertainty mount. Corporate executives are noting signs of hesitation in consumer behavior, which could impact business performance. This corporate caution could become self-fulfilling if businesses respond by cutting costs or delaying expansion plans. Meanwhile, the Japanese yen experienced some wild volatility, rebounding sharply against the dollar after initially declining following a Bank of Japan policy decision. Currency whipsaws like this reflect ongoing uncertainty about Japanese monetary policy and affect global capital flows. In more positive news for some people, a defense industry tycoon saw his personal wealth soar to $37 billion following a successful IPO, highlighting how increased global defense spending is reshaping markets and creating massive fortunes. Gold prices have eased after nearly hitting the $5,000 per ounce mark, with investors taking profits following the precious metal's remarkable rally. Gold remains a key indicator of investor sentiment about economic stability and inflation expectations. And here is something that should worry the financial sector. Wall Street analysts are increasingly concerned about risks building in the private credit market. This sector has grown exponentially in recent years, and any disruption could have widespread implications for markets and the economy. Major U.S. financial institutions have significant exposure here, so if things go south, it could get ugly pretty fast. In corporate news, Netflix shares dropped despite strong fourth-quarter results because the company's forward guidance failed to meet investor expectations. This demonstrates that in today's market, Even beating current expectations is not enough if your outlook disappoints. Intel stock absolutely crashed in after-hours trading following disappointing news, raising serious questions about the semiconductor giant's near-term prospects. But while Intel struggles, Elon Musk's fortune hit a record $788 billion as Tesla stock spiked 4%. And speaking of major deals, the United States and China have finalized an agreement regarding TikTok's U.S. operations, potentially resolving years of concerns about national security and data privacy. This deal could have major implications for how foreign-owned tech companies operate in America. All right, let us jump into the technology sector, because there are some radical developments happening in the digital realm. Tesla is discontinuing its autopilot feature in a bid to push more customers toward its full self-driving software. This is a major strategic shift that eliminates the mid-tier option and forces customers to choose between basic features or the expensive FSD package. And speaking of Tesla, the company has launched robotaxi rides in Austin with no human safety driver behind the wheel. This is one of the most ambitious autonomous vehicle launches by a major automaker in the United States. The service puts Tesla in direct competition with established players like Waymo. OpenAI is setting its sights on enterprise dollars, planning to significantly expand its business-focused offerings in 2026. The AI giant wants to tap into the massive corporate software market and compete with established enterprise providers. But here is some drama. Google DeepMind CEO Demis Hassabis expressed surprise at OpenAI rushing forward with ads in ChatGPT, highlighting a philosophical divide among AI leaders about monetization. Meanwhile, an AI inference startup called Inferact just landed $150 million to commercialize VLLM technology, which promises to make running large language models more efficient and affordable. Google is making moves too. CyberFriends. The company is adding your Gmail and photos to AI mode to enable what they are calling personal intelligence. This integration lets Google's Gemini AI access your communications and photo collections for more personalized responses, though it definitely raises privacy considerations. Google is also offering free SAT practice tests powered by Gemini, making test prep more accessible through AI technology. Apple is reportedly planning to launch an AI-powered wearable PIN device as soon as 2027, entering the emerging wearable AI category. And eBay has banned illicit automated shopping amid the rapid rise of AI agents that can purchase items faster than humans, creating fairness concerns on the platform. But not all AI news is positive. The developers of Curl, a widely used data transfer tool, scrapped their bug bounty program because they were overrun with low-quality AI-generated submissions. The maintainers cited the need to preserve their mental health, highlighting a growing challenge for open-source projects dealing with AI slop. And Microsoft experienced a widespread outage affecting Outlook and Teams, disrupting communications for millions of users globally before recovery efforts got underway. Now let us turn to our local New York coverage because there is some seriously important stuff happening in the 5 boroughs and surrounding areas. First up, the weather situation. Officials are warning that a weekend snowstorm could bring considerable disruption to NYC and New Jersey. The latest forecast suggests the New York City area could see up to 1 foot of snow this weekend. That is some serious accumulation, digital pals. Authorities are urging residents to stock up on supplies and avoid unnecessary travel. The weekend timing might provide some relief by avoiding weekday commute disruptions, but you are still going to need to break out those snow shovels. In absolutely heartbreaking news, 2 siblings are dead and their mother is critically hurt in an apparent Bronx murder-suicide. This devastating tragedy has shocked the local community, and investigators are working to piece together what led to this horrible incident. It highlights ongoing concerns about domestic violence and mental health crises in New York City. In other Bronx news, the NYPD arrested a man for stabbing one teen and attacking another at a Bronx subway station, raising renewed concerns about transit safety. The nursing situation in New York City continues to develop, with nurses scrambling to make ends meet as their strike drags on longer than expected. Healthcare workers who walked off the job seeking better pay and working conditions are now struggling to cover basic expenses without regular paychecks. Many are dipping into savings or taking side jobs to survive. The strike is having far-reaching impacts, affecting not only patients, but also the nurses' own access to healthcare. These nurses are making a bold case for significantly higher salaries, arguing they should earn $200,000 annually. They point to intense work pressures, staff shortages, demanding patient loads, and the expensive reality of living in one of the world's most costly cities. Speaking of expensive, your Con Edison bill just went up. New York state regulators approved a rate increase, meaning higher electricity bills for millions. The utility will implement a 10.4% hike over 3 years, adding significant costs to household budgets. Con Edison cited infrastructure improvements and operational costs, but consumer advocates are concerned about the impact on low-income residents already struggling with the high cost of living. New York City's job market showed sluggish growth, adding only 27,000 jobs in 2024. This meager figure suggests the city's economic recovery may be slowing, raising concerns about economic vitality and the ability to attract businesses. And there is drama around the city's new trash bin requirements. The maker of NYC's hard-to-find trash bins has reportedly left town, creating a supply crisis as residents scramble to comply with new waste containerization laws. People are facing potential fines for non-compliance, but they cannot find the required bins. During freezing temperatures, New York City activates Code Blue protocols to protect the homeless population. Outreach teams mobilize to locate people living on the streets and offer shelter and services, though many individuals refuse shelter for various reasons. It is challenging work that highlights the ongoing struggle to address homelessness, especially during extreme weather. In some truly disturbing news, a twisted NYC mom allegedly imprisoned her starving 14-year-old twin sons for about a decade. According to neighbors and sources, she wanted babies forever, resulting in severe neglect and abuse. The twins were discovered malnourished, with signs of prolonged captivity and developmental delays. And in upstate New York, a heroic father died saving his 6-year-old son after their snowmobile fell through an icy pond. The father managed to push his son to safety before succumbing to the freezing water himself. It is an absolutely heartbreaking story of ultimate parental sacrifice. And finally, in political and legal news affecting New York, Trump has sued JPMorgan Chase and CEO Jamie Dimon for $5 billion over alleged post-January 6th debanking. The lawsuit claims the bank discriminated by closing or restricting his banking relationships based on political views. Well, that is the news for today, cyber friends. We have covered everything from ICE enforcement controversies to international peace talks, from economic turbulence to technological innovations, and from winter storms to local tragedies right here in the Big Apple. It has been totally tubular surfing the information superhighway with you today. Don't forget to bookmark reality and keep those critical thinking skills sharp. This is Big Back News. Logging off. Free Sully and catch you on the flip side.